Welcome to Auto News Talk. When you walk onto a dealership lot, everything looks so permanent. Like the rows of shiny new cars, the massive glass showrooms.
Inflatable gorillas?
Right, exactly. The giant inflatable gorillas on the roof, it all looks, incredibly resilient on the surface, but underneath.
Oh, it is a massive structural earthquake underneath.
Yeah, the ground is moving so fast beneath those tires. And that's what we are exploring on the show, the hidden forces that are completely reshaping how cars are built, bought, and sold.
Because honestly, those inflatable gorillas are just, they're watching a multi-billion-dollar game of musical chairs unfold. To truly understand this auto landscape, you really have to pull back and look at the whole board.
Right.
The physical changes happening on the lot are just symptoms. They're symptoms of global trade rules shifting, automakers literally picking up entire factories and moving them across borders, and, this wild technological arms race happening in the back office.
Okay, so let's unpack this terrain we're walking through. We are going to look at the massive billions moving across borders, how that just collides head-on with the electric vehicle revolution, and finally, how dealerships are having to use hyper-targeted data just to survive this squeeze.
Yeah, and the foundation of all this movement really comes down to overarching economic pressures.
Yeah.
They're forcing automakers to fundamentally change their physical operations. I was reading this analysis from a Cox Auto market brief, and it points out this big warning.
Okay, what kind of warning?
Well, the U.S. auto market shows this surface-level resilience, right? But the underlying economic and trade pressures are building up rapidly.
Yeah, that surface resilience is super tricky because when you look at the top-line numbers, consumer spending is actually up, which, on paper sounds fantastic for selling cars.
It sounds amazing until you look at the mechanics of what consumers are actually spending that money on. The Cox Auto analysis cautions that this growth in spending is tied almost entirely to necessities.
Not fun stuff.
Right. Household expenses are rising significantly faster than income, and that creates this persistent affordability pressure for vehicle shoppers.
That makes sense. If I'm stretched on basic household necessities like groceries and rent, I'm certainly not taking on a new, totally discretionary truck payment.
Exactly.
So that growth in consumer spending being tied to necessities, it means it is actively squeezing out those auto purchases. It completely alters how consumers finance cars, right?
Yeah, they essentially have two choices. They either delay the purchase entirely, or they look for really extreme ways to stretch their credit just to make the monthly math work.
Wow.
And that affordability strain dictates the entire flow of the market. Plus, the labor signals complicating all this are incredibly mixed. The brief notes that unemployment remains low.
Which is usually good.
Right, usually a green light for auto sales because buying a car depends heavily on job stability and access to credit. Simultaneously, labor force participation has actually declined.
Which brings up a massive limitation in this whole data set for me. If fewer people are actively participating in the workforce, that long-term credit stability is on super shaky ground.
Definitely.
Like what this report doesn't really answer is where future economic growth is actually going to come from to support auto sales, if the labor pool itself just keeps shrinking.
It is a critical blind spot for the macroeconomic outlook. And compounding that domestic pressure is international trade uncertainty. That same Cox Automotive analysis highlights the uncertainty surrounding the USMCA.
Wait, the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement.
Right. Yeah, specifically the uncertainty about its non-renewal.
And that agreement is basically the bedrock of how cars get built in North America.
Completely. Think about the physical mechanics of building a vehicle across international borders. North American vehicle production relies on these highly integrated, multi-directional supply chains.
So parts are just bouncing back and forth?
Exactly. A single component, like a wiring harness or a steering column, it might cross the border multiple times before the vehicle is finally assembled and rolled off the line.
That's wild to think about.
Right. So when the rules governing those borders get fuzzy, it completely ruins the underlying math of production. It creates massive trade risk for an industry that operates on these super long planning cycles and requires, billions in upfront capital investment.
And we are actually seeing companies react to that exact uncertainty with real physical changes. Like you can see a direct response to these trade pressures in this report detailing Toyota's manufacturing strategy.
Oh, yeah. They are physically moving pieces around the board to protect themselves.
They really are. Toyota is planning a massive $3.6 billion investment.
Billion with a B.
Billion with a B. And they are doing it to move production of the Tacoma midsize pickup from Mexico over to its manufacturing campus in San Antonio, Texas.
Which is a huge play. Because if you are building a truck, parts are moving constantly. By drawing a smaller circle around their production right there in Texas, they are strengthening their U.S. supply chain.
Right. They are shielding it from those exact border disruptions we just talked about.
And the physical scale of this move is staggering. This expansion is expected to create about 2,000 U.S. jobs.
Wow.
Yeah. They're adding a second vehicle assembly line, which will essentially double the size of that San Antonio plant. Production capacity there is expected to jump from roughly 200,000 vehicles to 350,000 annually.
Just to help you visualize that scale, imagine standing in that San Antonio plant. It is already 2.7 million square feet.
It's a small city.
It really is. It's already pumping out the tundra and the sequoia. And they are about to nearly double that footprint. I mean, it is a physical, multi-billion-dollar reaction to the exact trade rules and supply chain pressures the Cox Auto brief was warning about.
Exactly. By localizing production, Toyota is shielding its best-selling truck from cross-border volatility, which, by the way, actively helps them close the U.S. sales gap with General Motors. But the transition from their Tijuana plant to Texas, it's a massive multi-year endeavor.
Right. But the report also notes something interesting. Toyota will actually continue producing Tacomas at their Guanajuato plant in Mexico.
Yeah, they aren't totally abandoning it.
But managing two separate supply chains for the exact same vehicle across a volatile border seems incredibly complex. Like, how will Toyota balance the logistics of keeping partial production running in Guanajuato while massively expanding in Texas under shifting trade rules?
It feels like a logistical tightrope.
It really does. It requires an unbelievable level of coordination.
And here's the craziest part. While automakers are spending billions to secure their physical supply chains for these traditional profitable trucks like the Tacoma,
they are simultaneously navigating a totally chaotic, unpredictable shift on an entirely different front: electric vehicles.
Yes. They are playing strict defense on their traditional trucks and just wild offense on EVs.
So wild. Looking at a car and driver roundup of upcoming models, there is a massively crowded, highly ambitious pipeline of EV launches expected through 2030 across every single vehicle segment.
The sheer volume of incoming product detailed in that roundup is just staggering. Looking at the immediate upcoming wave, you have heavy hitters entering the market. The BMW iX3 is coming in as an electric alternative to the standard X3 with about 400 miles of range.
That's solid range.
Very solid.
Yeah.
You've also got the Genesis Magma pushing into the high-performance space, and the Kia EV3 targeting the compact market.
And the momentum just accelerates moving into the subsequent wave. That's when we see the push into extreme luxury and utility.
Right. Everybody wants a piece of it.
Exactly. Audi is bringing an electric sports car. Bentley is launching its first EV, the Torcal SUV. And Ford is dropping a new small electric pickup on a universal platform. Then further down the line, we are looking at a joint General Motors and Hyundai electric van platform.
But this pipeline, it isn't immune to those global trade pressures we discussed earlier.
Shocker.
Right. The Car and Driver Roundup explicitly notes that tariffs are already disrupting timelines. For example, Alpine, which is Renault's performance brand, they've delayed their U.S. EV entry, specifically due to tariff issues.
Man, to really capture the chaos of this market, just look at the extremes hitting showrooms on the exact same timeline.
It's all over the place.
It is. You've got the Kia EV3 trying to hit the masses at an estimated $35,000. And right alongside it on the same timeline, Ferrari is dropping its first EV, the Luce.
Oh, yeah, the Luce.
With 1,035 horsepower and a projected $640,000 price tag. I mean, it's the Wild West.
It really is. And the implication for the local dealership is profound. Imagine you are the general manager of a dealership looking at your allocation sheets.
You'd be terrified.
You are facing an overwhelming influx of unproven inventory. You have to closely watch allocation plans, changing charging infrastructure requirements, and shifting on-sale dates. Because as we know, a corporate announcement absolutely does not guarantee a successful consumer launch.
Yeah, given those tariff issues and rapidly shifting market conditions, you really have to wonder how much of this announced pipeline will actually materialize in showrooms with the promised specs. The gap between a press release and a physical car on a lot is getting wider every production cycle.
It's huge. And that brings us to the harsh financial reality of this EV transition. because there's a different perspective that pushes back hard on this EV optimism.
Back to the Cox Auto analysis.
Exactly, the one we discussed earlier. They identify EV lease economics as a major growing liability.
Look, if I'm a dealer, I have to be sweating. The math of leasing is just breaking down for electric vehicles.
Let's look at how that math actually works for those who might not know. There is a growing dangerous gap between expected lease residual values and the actual falling market values of used EVs.
So the residual value is essentially the finance company's educated guess of what the car will be worth at the end of the 3-year lease.
Precisely. So if a customer signs a lease on a $60,000 EV, the bank estimates its future value to calculate the monthly payment.
But if actual market values fall well below those estimates, which is actively happening rapidly with used EVs, automakers and finance companies take massive losses when those vehicles are returned.
The financial hit is massive. They are desperately trying to find ways to keep these off-lease vehicles out of the wholesale channel so they don't crater the market even further.
It is such a stark contradiction. Automakers are throwing this massive party, rolling out 20-plus new EV models with incredible specs. But the financial hangover, these plummeting residual values, is hitting the dealers and the finance arms right in the teeth right now.
That's a huge mess.
But an open question remains for me. How do automakers absorb these massive residual losses without eventually passing the cost directly onto the consumer sticker price for future models?
Honestly, they likely can't, which further exacerbates that affordability crisis we started with. This dynamic completely paralyzes dealer inventory decisions. If a dealer can't trust what a car will be worth in 3 years, they hesitate to stock it.
Makes total sense.
Furthermore, it warps consumer views of EV ownership costs. If resale values tank, the total cost of ownership skyrockets.
Which forces dealerships into a really tight corner. They are squeezed by macro affordability issues holding back traditional buyers, and they are carrying all this EV inventory risk. They can no longer afford sloppy, broad strokes operations.
No, the days of just throwing stuff at the wall are over.
They have to get microscopic with their efficiency, right down to the individual parking space on their lot.
And that hyper-efficiency is the necessary evolution for survival. There's an industry article I read that argues the solution starts exactly there on the physical lot.
What's the strategy?
Well, they highlight that dealerships are wasting massive amounts of their advertising budget on high-demand cars, which creates an invisible tax by ignoring the slow-moving inventory that actually carries financial risk.
Wow. It's treating advertising like a blunt instrument instead of a scalpel. They are optimizing for the wrong things entirely.
The article actually features Randy Kobat from LotLinks, who points out that dealers rely way too heavily on broad marketing metrics. Things like overall clicks, total impressions, and website leads.
Yeah, those metrics feel really good to track in a monthly marketing meeting. Look at all our clicks. But they don't actually reflect inventory performance.
Exactly. The core argument is that vehicles must be treated as a portfolio of depreciating assets. Holding onto a car costs money every single day.
Right.
A high-demand car sitting on the lot might need absolutely zero paid promotion to sell. It practically sells itself. But often, it's eating up ad dollars while a struggling unit sits ignored in the back, quietly depreciating and eating into the profit margin.
The numbers backing this up are just wild to me. The cited LotLinks survey found that 44% of dealership decision makers have little to no visibility into which specific VINs, like which specific individual cars, get disproportionate ad attention.
44%.
Nearly half of them. And a shocking 9% take up to 15 days just to identify a struggling unit.
Oh, and most take much longer than that.
Right. In a market where cars are depreciating assets, holding a car for 15 days before realizing it needs marketing help is an eternity.
It is a massive drain on profitability. The implication here is that ad budgets don't actually need to be bigger. They just need to be reallocated directly to the vehicles that actively need demand support.
By tying ad spend directly to VIN-level risk, dealers can reduce eventual markdowns and actively protect their gross profit margins.
Yep.
I do have a point of friction with this idea, though. What this approach doesn't really answer for me is whether treating every single car solely as a depreciating asset ignores the broader brand-building value of advertising. Like, doesn't heavily advertising a popular high-demand halo car bring foot traffic to the dealership that ultimately benefits everything else on the lot?
That's a fair point, but it assumes perfectly rational, connected consumer behavior, which is rarely the case. Foot traffic doesn't automatically translate to moving a stale, 60-day-old sedan.
Fair enough.
Achieving true VIN-level efficiency requires more than just changing an ad strategy. It requires a fundamental upgrade in how a dealership's software talks to itself to actually identify those opportunities.
Which brings us to the technological nervous system of the dealership. Another perspective on dealership efficiency comes from an interview with A.J. McGowan, who is an executive at Reynolds Reynolds.
Right.
He points out that the next evolution of dealership survival relies entirely on something called agentic AI.
And to understand agentic AI, you really have to look at the fundamental problem it is solving. Dealership data is historically fragmented across different departments.
Totally siloed.
Exactly. The sales team has their software, the service bay has theirs, and marketing operates in another silo entirely. McGowan argues that fragmented platforms severely limit what AI can understand and act on. AI needs clean data, broad context, and human operational knowledge to actually learn and be useful.
He makes a really clear distinction between cognitive systems and agentic AI. I like to think about it this way. Generative AI, the stuff most people are using to summarize emails, is like the eager intern.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. It can read a document and give you a summary. But agentic AI is the veteran employee who connects the dots across the whole building, knowing who to call, what files to pull, and how to independently close the deal.
Exactly. Cognitive software is deeply embedded in single transactions. Agentic AI can actually pursue goals, learn complex workflows, and use multiple different software tools to achieve an outcome.
So what is Reynolds actually doing with this?
Well, Reynolds is building a platform called Ray, specifically designed to unify their DMS, CRM, and AutoVision tools into one agentic system.
And McGowan provided a brilliant example of how this looks in practice right in the service drive.
Oh, this is the best part.
Imagine you pull into the service bay for a routine oil change. An agentic AI, looking across all the dealership's unified data, notices that you only have 2 lease payments left on your current vehicle.
Okay.
It also sees that your exact model is currently in extremely high demand on the used market. The AI instantly flags that simple oil change as a prime vehicle acquisition opportunity for the sales team.
It connects a maintenance interaction directly to a sales opportunity, solving a used car sourcing problem in one move.
It's brilliant.
The implication is undeniable. AI's value is absolutely zero if your data is siloed. If the AI can't see the whole picture, it can't make the connection. The future belongs entirely to consolidated platforms.
But there's a massive vulnerability here, right? AI relies entirely on clear human processes.
Yep.
If a dealership's underlying data is messy, if the humans in the service bay or the sales floor are entering bad information, won't AI just make the mess happen faster?
That is the danger. McGowan explicitly states that employees remain central because their operational knowledge is what teaches the AI. If the foundation is flawed, the AI simply scales that human flaw at light speed.
You cannot automate poor management.
Exactly. You cannot automate poor management.
So let's step back and look at the whole terrain we just covered. If we connect this to the bigger picture, 3 major themes really emerge across all these sources. First, we are witnessing the aggressive localization of supply chains.
Yeah, we saw the economic rationale for this in Cox Auto's warnings about USMCA trade uncertainty, and we saw the physical reality of it in Toyota's multi-billion-dollar pivot to bring Tacoma production closer to home in Texas. They are pulling their operations inward to weather the global storm.
And the second theme is a severe product and market disconnect. There's a glaring tension between the hyper-ambitious EV pipeline detailed by Car and Driver and the painful financial reality of tanking EV residual values outlined by Cox Auto.
The product development side is accelerating rapidly, while the financial mechanics supporting those very products are just stalling out.
Stalling it hard. And the third theme is the shift to hyper-specific operations. Dealers can no longer rely on broad strokes. They are moving from general metrics to precise, data-driven actions.
We see that supported by both the LotLinks strategy of VIN-level advertising and Reynolds' push for cross-department AI integration.
Right. And within those themes, 2 massive contradictions are actively forcing the industry to adapt. First, automakers are flooding the zone with electric models, spending billions on development, yet the core financial mechanics, like those lease residuals, are breaking down and paralyzing the showrooms.
The math just doesn't math. And the second contradiction is technological. The push for advanced AI automation is massive, promising to revolutionize operations, but it's deeply contradicted by the fact that its success still entirely depends on fundamentally sound, human-driven data processes.
So the era of coasting on broad market trends is officially over. For a dealership, an automaker, or an industry professional to survive, they have to deeply integrate their intelligence.
They absolutely have to.
That means recognizing how a macro event like a Mexican trade agreement directly impacts the physical layout of a local Texas lot. And it means technologically tying the service bay to sales acquisitions so no opportunity is ever missed.
It's all connected.
It really is. The auto industry isn't just changing what we drive. It's completely rewriting the underlying math of how those vehicles are built and sold. Thanks for joining us on Auto News Talk. As you watch the market, keep an eye on your local lots. Are they adapting to this connected VIN-level reality, or are they still throwing ad dollars at cars that sell themselves? Next time you walk past those shiny rows of inventory, just remember the tectonic plates grinding beneath your feet. The real story is always happening beneath the surface.